Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Ranking Member Lukemeyer and my colleagues on the subcommittee for the opportunity to serve as Ranking Member on the Subcommittee of Oversight, Investigations, and Regulations, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you in this capacity. Small businesses shuttered, American families struggling to pay their rent, livelihoods destroyed. These are the devastating consequences we've witnessed as a result of this pandemic, and along with it, forced lockdowns all across the country. Fortunately, in my state of Texas, we were able to open back up quickly, giving millions of small business owners the opportunity to keep their doors open and to fight to protect the businesses that they've invested their lives in. But what we are here to discuss today, a federal nationwide mandate to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, will put us right back to where we were months ago. American jobs destroyed, small businesses forced to close their doors, and life savings gone to waste. I can't think of anything more devastating at a time when our small businesses are barely getting back on their feet. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your comments on wanting to take this slower, getting as much input from small businesses that it will affect as possible. I really appreciate that. And you had actually quoted from the Congressional Budget Office, their nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, that estimated that an increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour would lead to a loss of 1.4 million jobs by 2025. And of those 1.4 million workers displaced, the CBO estimated that 700,000, half of those workers, would fall out of the labor force entirely. And make no mistake, this top-down, one-size-fits-all mandate will impact our small businesses the most. These mom-and-pop shops already operate on thin margins. The local Main Street restaurants, hardware stores, hair salons, and florists, the heartbeat of our communities. And they simply cannot absorb this mandated increase by any way. And not to mention, a wage mandate takes away any variation in discretion that an entrepreneur has to scale his or her business to the area in which it operates, whether that's in my home state of Texas or the chairman's home state of Minnesota. Why should a waitress at a busy restaurant in the heart of New York City, where the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $2,475 a month, be forced to make the exact same amount as a waitress in Billingsley, Montana, where the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $678 a month? The federal government does not and cannot know what's best for each town across America, and this one-size-fits-all mandate fails to recognize the diversity and uniqueness of our townships, towns, cities, and metropolitan communities. What I can't seem to wrap my head around is the American workers who will be impacted the most by this reckless policy. My colleagues who support this proposal claim this will help our lower to middle class, our single moms. And as a single mother myself, who was a waitress back in the day, I sit here wondering what these single moms will do when the local restaurant or hair salon where they work is forced to close their doors because they simply can't pay their employees $15 an hour. Or when businesses have to choose between shutting down or replacing their workers with automation. As one of my colleagues across the aisle said over the weekend, we don't want those businesses. That's his message to our mom and pop shops struggling to keep their doors open right now. If you can't afford to pay $15 an hour, we don't want you. Let that sink in for a minute. After being selected to serve on this committee, I was eager to sit down with local business owners across North Texas to hear firsthand what's working and what isn't working, where they need government to get out of the way, and they were all crystal clear. Increasing the minimum wage will have a disastrous impact on their business. In fact, many were confident they would have to close their doors immediately. And what does that mean for American workers? From young workers to single moms, our working families will be hit hardest by this policy. And don't just take my word for it. Over the last few weeks, our committee has received testimony from small business owners all across the country explaining how this federal mandate would decimate their businesses and their livelihoods along with it. And I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to be able to enter these statements into the congressional record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to share testimony we received from Ian McLean, president and owner of Highland Landscaping in my district of Southlake, Texas, and the chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Small Business Council. Here's what he had to say about how legislation that would increase the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 per hour would affect his business. Quote, before we started hearing about Congress's plan to raise the federal minimum wage, we had begun exploring solutions to growing wages in our industry, such as robotic mowing systems and purchasing more machinery to do more of the labor work on the construction side. In order to mitigate the effects of a minimum wage hike, we would fast-track those solutions and eliminate most of our entry-level and less skilled labor positions. Unfortunately, this would eliminate our ability to provide youth jobs, entry-level jobs, and summer jobs. And as a small business owner, I take great pride in creating and sustaining jobs for people who can then provide for their families. I believe most small business owners do as well. During the pandemic, I was able to create new jobs. With news of a potential wage hike, I'm now making preparations to move in the opposite direction. Small business is the biggest job creator in the United States and the driving force of our economy. A wage hike to $15 per hour would cause small business owners like me to not only stop creating jobs, but to eliminate jobs, end quote. Mr. Chairman, I truly believe each and every one of us here, from our colleagues to our witnesses to our small business owners, want the same thing. We want to see our small businesses make it out of this pandemic. We want to see working families lifted up. And we want to advance policies that will give every American a shot at living their American dream. I look forward to finding ways to work across the aisle to accomplish these goals, but a one-size-fits-all minimum wage mandate is not the answer. I thank all of the witnesses for joining us today, and I yield back.